Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today I have Steve Hall back on for, man, at this point, Steve, we're probably somewhere between 5 and 10 at this point. But the good news for you is that means you're obviously I enjoy chatting with you and everyone enjoys listening to you. I know I always get really good feedback from our episodes. So really looking forward to catching up with you. It's been, I think the last time we chatted was probably sometime in October-ish, I think just off the top of my head. So it's actually been
Oh, wow.
quite a bit already. I think that's the longest you and I have gone in between. Yeah, looking forward to chatting with you, man.
Dude, I can't believe how much time just passes by so quickly. It doesn't feel that long since we've last spoken, and it's always amazing to chat to you. I think I always come off these and I'm like, Jeff, that was such a fun chat. Thanks for inviting me on because, yeah, it's fun to be able to have these chit chats with like-minded people. And yeah, you're a great guy.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and there's obviously people that you just feel like, I'm sure you feel this way. Some episodes, some people you chat with, it's like it's sometimes hard to keep the conversation going. And then some people, time just flies and you have a game plan of what you're going to talk about, but then you always go off the plan and you just end up talking about a million things. And like you said, you could do it for probably hours. So
Yeah, I know exactly that sense of some people you just click with, or you're more interested or invested in what they're saying. I don't know. It happens though. And you can feel it as a listener, I think, when you hear those episodes where it's like, oh, they're really good rapport. That was fun to listen to. So yeah, it's just one of those things.
have you ever had an episode you did and you ended up not putting it up with a guest?
I believe there has actually only ever been two episodes we recorded and not put out, but they were both for, I think one was actually for not audio quality, but they weren't English as their first language. And
Uh,
that was a really good lesson for me because it was very hard on my end to like even generate a good discussion because of how their English wasn't amazing, which their English was good. It just wasn't, it's a podcast, right? So people listening want it to be audibly very high quality, and it just wasn't. And then the other one was audio was just terrible. He was like sat outside a coffee shop and it was super loud. And in the recording, in the moment, I didn't really think about it. This was quite early during the podcast, but that other one was maybe last year sometime. It basically interviewed a researcher, and I didn't even think, hey, English isn't their first language. Are they good at speaking English? So now that's something I will check. A lot of research, you probably, I don't know if you've looked to bring many researchers on. I'm sure you have, but a lot of them, there's quite a few Spanish people, or
yep.
and English isn't their first language. So it's just not sure. You can't bring them on the platform because it's just not. I don't speak Spanish, and nor does most of the audience.
Yep. Nor do I have any idea on how to speak Spanish too. Luckily, I haven't ran into that problem. That definitely is, like you said, some of the researchers, they are, like you said, they don't speak English as their first language. I could definitely see on a podcast how that would be very challenging. Since it's been since October, what's been going on in your world? We'll obviously talk about your current prep that you're on. That's probably going to be the bulk of this conversation. From a personal standpoint, business standpoint, Revive Stronger standpoint, anything been going on in the last, I guess, what is that, 8 months now? Ish. No, yeah, 10 months, I guess that would be almost at this point.
That's wild. It's been that long. A lot has gone on, but also not much.
Yeah.
So I can't say too much, but this has been the most stressful, probably the worst. Probably the worst year of my life. That sounds really dramatic, but fundamentally that is how it has been. Things outside, it's not me, but it's like people in and relationships and things like this that have just been, like essentially someone close to me has just very bad health. And so going through that has been very challenging, and the stress has been really high. It's crazy because in some ways this has been the smoothest prep ever, and I think there's lots of things that are helping that, and we'll probably get into it. But in many ways, it should be one of the hardest ever because all my other preps, I had such little going on, where it was a breeze. Whereas this one, with that big, overwhelming stress, it's been tough. But otherwise, businesses and prep has just been on the back burner and just happening. Otherwise, I can't think there's been too much else. And like I said, prep, I started dieting in March. So it's actually been quite a while that I've been dieting for now. In some ways, it doesn't feel that long because I think I only really started feeling it the last like month, and truly, like you and me spoke off air, Jeff, this past week, it kicked up an extra notch. But I think because of those other life stresses, it just happened in the background. I was just like, yep, cool. And in some way, those other stresses helped take me out of bodybuilding. So in some weird way, it's been good. And certainly that is going to act as motivation to continue. Like if stuff gets hard, I'm just going to remind myself, dude, you're choosing to do this, and this is easy because there's people close to you going through much harder things. So yeah, it's been. I'm going to try and be as positive as I can about what's happened this year, but it's not been overly positive, which is unfortunate.
Sorry to hear that. Hopefully, a person close to you is doing all right, and hopefully, there's some light at the end of the tunnel. I think it's pretty crazy how much that stuff really can impact you. Just from a training perspective, and then obviously when you're trying to get super lean, I can only imagine how much that really can impact. Stress is no joke, and stuff like that really does play a big role. I think we brush it off, but it does. Have you hit on it a little bit, but have you noticed anything specific there that maybe it's impacted from day to day or anything like that?
I, you know what? I have to say, if I wasn't doing the job I do, it would have been even more stress because I would have had to have taken time off work. Thankfully, I'm my own boss, so I can manage my hours. I can move around check-ins a little bit on the day. I can move around my training. So it just meant, hey, I had to move a rest day to a day that it normally wouldn't be. Sometimes I had to do work later or on weekends when I normally wouldn't. And I just had to, yeah, be flexible with my routine and structure. And that's been okay. It's been all right, honestly. So I can't complain too much. The worst thing has been just this like heightened level of just anxiety. I think I'm a relatively anxious person, with just my baseline anxiety is probably a few percentage points above average. And then this was like bumped up again. And so I had some just weeks and days of terrible sleep. For me, terrible sleep. And I notice even if I don't get like a great night's sleep, I notice it. So as soon as I get like several poor night's sleep, it catches up to you. So what it has also reinforced is just how much I love my routine and love bodybuilding is just something that grounds me and is my anchor day to day. So that there are times I can focus and get my head in training. I can get my head on, oh, I met these numbers nutritionally by the end of the day and I'm moving towards this goal. I'm so grateful for that because I think, especially at these sort of stressful times, it'd be so easy just to let my world go to complete crap as well. And thankfully, with bodybuilding being there, I'm like, oh no, I have these behaviors that are really helpful and beneficial, and they're going to keep me moving forward. So that's at least been a big lesson for me.
Do you have any kind of go-to things that help you manage stress like that? Do you have anything that kind of keeps you grounded? Obviously, you mentioned there that being in your routine seems to keep you pretty grounded, but do you have any kind of special things that you do to manage it, or anything that you focus on specifically?
It's one of those things where you can have all the knowledge in the world, but actually getting it to happen for you is real tough. I think it's similar to you speak to someone who's struggled with their weight their entire life, and you're just like, hey, eat less and move more. And they're like, you don't think I've tried that?
Yeah.
Come on. Just, you can't tell me that just to do that. So trying to try and enact a stoic philosophy, like focus on what you can control and not what you can't. Try and take moments in the day to stress about the event and not worry about it later in the day. Things like this, or even I do supplement with ashwagandha. So I take ashwagandha daily, and then I take L-theanine if I've had quite a stressful day and I want that more acute relaxation response for sleep. If I'm awake in my bed for 15, 20 minutes, I get out of the bed, come down into my office and read a book and try and get sleepy and go back to bed. I do all the right things, but still, when something's just like clawing away at you at the back of your head, it's really tough to get rid of it. Similar to the day before, I know for me, day before a bodybuilding show, like I don't get good sleep that night. I know I should because ultimately you're kind of going on stage for a plastic trophy. It's not that big a deal. There's much larger, more important things in life, but part of me just can't switch off to it. So I think it's just knowing myself like that too, and just being prepared. And probably exposure helps. I think it will. The more and more that I go through such things, I'll be able to deal with it better. And a kind of quote that comes to mind is, and I don't know where this is from, but this too shall pass. It's something you hear, and
Yep.
it's so true. Like time is often the best healer of all. Yeah.
Like you said, there's no matter what you can, like you said, you can do all these things, but at the end of the day, stressful things are going to be stressful, and there's only so much you can do. I think it's probably at that point, just what can you control at that point? And again, like you said, falling back on your routine, staying consistent with that helps you stay grounded there. So do you have anything that you track in terms of anything that's, I guess it would be objective from like a recovery standpoint? Do you have anything like that you monitor?
No, and I on purpose I don't.
Right.
So I don't know if I've said this before on here, but I love bodybuilding. I'll invest. way too much money into it if I wasn't careful into like various supplements and stuff like that. But I'm incredibly skeptical, first of all, of various supplements for good reason. And then the same here, Aura Ring was just like calling me, and it has for a long time, where I'm just like, that's so cool, like it can do all of this. Or you hear adverts for the Whoop and how it's gonna give you all this data that's gonna be so useful. But thankfully I have someone called Greg Potter, who, if the audience don't know him, he's like incredibly smart guy. He's not part of the biohacking sphere, but he talks in that realm a little bit because he's got a PhD in sleep and so super clued up in these sort of things. He's just like, Steve, do not buy one. I think it would only make things worse, because I would be the sort of person that, seeing that, knowing that isn't actually an objective marker, like in terms of recovery score or sleep score or something like this, because I don't think those devices are good enough yet to be able to give us that. But I think I would be the sort of person that would be really easily affected by placebo or nocebo in this case. So it would negatively affect me. And I'm better at just being like, hey, I feel all right. Let's go with that. And I've even spoken to Greg. If I get a bad night's sleep, I ask him, what should I do? And he's always just like, just do what you always do. Get same with nutrition. You fall off the wagon, just get back on the wagon. There's actually nothing crazy biohackery you can do. And so I think these devices, I don't know, prey on people like us who want to be able to do that. And often the data just isn't that useful, and it can even send us the wrong way.
I think it was Menno actually had a post. It was maybe even just like yesterday or the last day or two, talking about sleep trackers, how they're pretty much, they put you in a bad spot for that reason, where it's like they're not super accurate. And then if anything, reminds me too of like the body composition trackers as well too, where it gets in your head more than anything. And really the best thing you can do is go off of how you feel. I think that's the most important thing. And it gets you to really pay attention to that as well too.
Yeah, he did post that because I commented on it being like, I think I just said yes.
Yes.
Because I was just like, yes, this confirms my bias and everything that I've heard about it. The funny thing is, I use a Fitbit. I used to use a Fitbit, sorry, for step tracking basically.
Mhm.
And then now I have this, what's it called? A Withings watch. Basically, it's more discreet. That's why I went for it. I just wanted something to track my steps, has a silent alarm in the morning, and that's basically what I wanted. But it does give me, it's funny, the Fitbit I think overestimated my steps. And I think this might underestimate my steps. And
Mm.
that makes me feel a bit bad. But also, I'm like, it doesn't matter so long as they're consistent and I'm just using them as like an accountability tool. But both of them gave me a sleep score. And the Withings consistently gives me amazing sleep scores. And sometimes I end up going in there and looking at it by accident, or I'm just like, oh, I'm interested. And it always makes me feel better. So it's maybe these devices just need to give like positive reinforcement, even if they're like lying to you.
Yeah. I was just wondering if you did anything like, because again, I usually don't ever recommend sleep trackers, even things like you said, like the Whoop and the Aura. Like you said, they're cool, but they also, something like the Whoop doesn't even track like steps, and they have their reason for why they don't do that. But I didn't know if you looked into resting heart rate or HRV or anything like that, just as a proxy of just overall recovery or anything like that, or if you ever have done anything like that.
I haven't done it myself, but I've spoken to people about it. I've spoken to people who are quite pro it, and I've spoken to people who are like, it doesn't really tell you anything that you can't already get from your body, or it's like a lagging indicator quite often, so it's too late for some things. I'm very simplistic, and I guess you could call it old school. I think there's enough to worry about
Yeah.
without having these, and I think normally your body is telling you everything you need to know without needing to use them. So the only thing I've ever looked at with interest, but it doesn't really tell me anything, is a resting heart rate. I just have tracked it during comp preps before, and just seeing it plummet at some point. Like it holds and holds, and then I get to a certain level of weight and leanness, and it's just like boom, it goes
Mm.
right down. But again, that's not really what can I do with that data apart from look at it with
Yep.
interest. So no, I don't.
Does that kind of, has that matched how you felt in your preps at times too, where it's once you get to that certain point, can you correlate those two together?
Yeah, normally you can feel it. Often it's met with more episodes of like low blood sugar or low blood pressure as well, where you're just like feeling a bit dizzy, or you're like out on a long walk. You're like, oh, I really wish I brought some sort of apple or something with me, because
Something.
I got to sit down and like yeah, I'm having a bit of a hyperglycemic episode here.
Speaking of your prep, I know that off air you mentioned fatigue started to come in here recently, but I know that you said you started in March. You've been at it for a little while, so maybe give the audience a bit of an overview. When are you competing? What does that look like? And yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, started back in March. That was purposely early because I started with Cliff, who is my coach. He's just doing the nutritional side because I felt like I have a really good handle on my training. May give him the reins on on training at some point, just out of interest to see
Yeah.
because you get stuck in your ways, and I know what I'm doing is productive and it's working, which is why I want to hold on to it. But at the same time, I know so many things can work, and I might learn something from something here throw at me. I just spoke to Peter Fitchen, who is coached by Cliff as well, and I think he had a new split and he had 5 by 10 on leg press or some. It might have been worse than that, like 10. It might have been 10 sets by 10. I can't remember. It was something crazy that I was just like, holy shit! I do 3 sets on leg press at the moment, and I'm trashed. I don't even know how I'd be able to go about this. So I would flirt with that idea. Anyway, tangent. So he's just doing my nutrition, and we started in January because I knew I wanted to give him as much time as possible with me to learn me as an individual, how I respond, because the ultimate goal is not to, sorry, the ultimate goal is to get to WNBF Worlds, which is in Boston this year. I don't know how close you are to Boston, Jeff.
I don't know the exact. I know it's a far drive, but it would be probably 2 hour flight, 2 to 3 hour flight
Oh, not
from
too
there.
bad.
Yep.
And actually, that's decent for me because it's on the West Coast. So it's only like, I think 6 or 7 hours flight, maybe, which isn't bad at all because Vegas in 2021 Worlds was like, I don't know, 12, 14
Oh
hour
yeah,
flight,
you're
something.
way on the other side of the country there.
Yeah, not fun. So yeah, I'm excited to potentially be able to qualify and do that. I say that's the ultimate goal. That's like the show that I'm like wanting to probably be my best for. So that's in November time. When is it? The 23rd, 24th of November. So ages away. But like I said, I wanted to give Cliff plenty of time to be able to map things out and know where we wanted to be. He decided to kick things off in March, knowing that I had a lot of stressors going on. And so we wanted to get ahead of schedule in case something happened where I needed to take a break or something. But I haven't needed to do anything like that. But we have had, I started off with 2 refeeds a week. That's continued throughout. And I did have, I think it was maybe a month ago, 2 whole weeks at maintenance. So just took a full diet break there, basically. And then just a couple of weeks ago, had 4 days basically at maintenance. But I've got 4 days diet break. So there's lots of, we're losing very slowly, put it that way. I think I started, how much was I weighing in March? Maybe not much over 190 pounds. I can't even remember precisely. And the lowest weighing I've seen is 176 pounds. So it's not been that much. It's maybe losing like a pound or less a week, like on average. So nice, slow, steady. But I started out pretty lean as well. As we've spoken about many times, it's hard for me to get up there in terms of body weight and body fat. So that's how it's gone so far. And nicely, I haven't had to have any diet adjustments for the last month or so, apart from a diet break. My actual low days haven't gone lower. My refeeds have stayed where they're at. So at the moment, my low days are, I think, 2,700 calories it comes to. I say that because Cliff just programs me macros. He doesn't give me the calories. I have to like
Figure
out
them
or
out.
whatever,
Yeah.
or they just come up on my fitness pal, to be honest. So that's all fine. And then yeah, my refeeds I think are like 3,300, 3,400 around that, which I mean, it's a good intake,
Yeah.
like considering where I'm at right now. The lightest I ever got, my last prep, my stage weight was between 170 to 175. So I'm within pounds of where I need to be. I know I've got more body fat to lose and I have been leaner than this, but I'm not much off the leanest I've ever been, which is exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you said you're looking at what, 170-ish is where you think you'll end up?
I don't know. These are the
Yeah.
sort of things people ask me, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I just have, and that's something that's been really nice. When you just have full faith in your coach to just I'll just be the athlete. I'll do what Cliff tells me to do. I'm not worried about my timeline. If I don't even care if I need to be 170 below, or Cliff thinks I have 2 pounds to lose. In some ways it might be nice to know, but I'm fine being in the blue in the out of the loop in a sense. And that's how Cliff likes to do it. He doesn't really like to give you weeks ahead where he thinks you're going to be,
Yeah.
anything like that. He likes to take almost every week as it comes. And I think for some people that doesn't work. They need a timeline. But for me right now, that seems to be all right. And I think it helps by having been so lean early and having been here before. I feel very confident that we're going to get there. I'm still, I won't believe it till I see it in regards to the conditioning that I want to have through my glutes. I've been close to all the way through. I'm thinking I would say it's like butthole to like complete outside of cheek, or the lines all the way through. You think of Dirk Emery. And that's where I think I need to be able to do what I want to do, which ultimately my goal now is to go pro. Incredibly challenging with the shows that I'm doing, but if I can bring a pro caliber physique, I'll be proud of that.
Yeah, no, yeah, your physique has definitely transformed over since I first started following you. Every time I see you, it's like, holy crap, this is
I
insane.
appreciate
Yeah, it's super impressive, man. And again, I say this every time I talk to you, it's consistency, which real quick, I actually, as you were talking, I was like, okay, maybe I got that wrong that we hadn't talked since October because that seemed way too long. And as I was looking, we did chat probably sometime in late March, early April. So
Ah,
that's my fault on that. I apologize for that because as you were saying some things talking about working with Cliff, I was like, okay, wait a minute. We
we've
definitely
said
talked
this.
about we talked about that last time. So I apologize. I definitely didn't do
It's
my
all good.
research there. But we did talk in March. So it was like the very beginning of your prep here that you started. Yeah, I know that you said again for you this has been a big thing working with Cliff. What are some things that he's maybe done differently or that you've focused on in this prep that maybe you would have done differently in the past?
Yeah, so I think he's probably saved me from myself in some ways. And I say that knowing that I do that, and you do that probably, Jeff, all the time for your clients, where they want to do something because, I don't know, X, Y, Z, it's going to be more optimal, what have you. And I was already the biggest thing that comes to mind was the weighted vest that I did in 2021,
Yep.
which was a big experiment for me. It was based off some data on like the gravitostat effect on the osteocytes within the bones. Basically you lose weight and you replace the weight via a weighted vest, and that should have some beneficial effects on potentially retaining more muscle, potentially having a impact on hunger management outside of ghrelin that normally has an impact, and leptin, like maybe the osteocytes sense something like that you're the same weight and so you won't be as hungry. But also obviously it helps with energy expenditure because you're now like, when you get lighter, those 10,000 steps that you're doing don't burn as many calories as when you're heavier. And this time round, I was intending to use it, but just for walks and just for steps. And that's what I was going to do. So, but I mentioned it to Cliff. He was like, not too interested. He was just like, I want to see if we can do this with just steps and food. I don't really want to do any cardio if we can help it. And if we can avoid wearing the weighted vest, I'd like to avoid that. And it's been so nice not needing to have the weighted vest and for my food still to be like very high because, and I'm sure my food will get lower, but my food had to come pretty low. I think it maybe got slightly sub 2000 calories last time, and I'm not even close to being below that at the moment. That's pretty cool. And I think that's just because it's not like we're cheating the system.
Yeah.
It's just, I think, one, maybe dieting a bit slow with Cliff. I'd have to look at actually how I was dieting through my last prep, but also maybe the weighted vest wasn't netting me that much extra expenditure,
Yeah.
in that I was just being lazy at other parts of the day, which is wild to me because I remember I'd from waking, wear it, and I would stand until I think 5 or 6 p.m. I don't stand at my desk at all. My step count is less than last prep, and I'm not wearing that weighted vest. Again, I don't think I'm cheating the system by any means. I don't feel amazing versus last prep, but certainly my hunger isn't worse. And like I said, I'm not on less food and it's not hurting my condition. So I think maybe it's something that I would learn from this is I used to think that you don't want to spend too much time dieting as an efficiency cost, right? If you lose slower, then you have to diet for longer. And it's similar to gaining muscle mass. If you gain at a slower rate, do you miss out on maybe some muscle gain, but you can gain for longer? And similar here, if you gain slower, you can just do it longer. And so I think that the benefit of that is the lower stress, and not having to lose as fast means you don't have to use some of these tools. You don't have to push your body as hard, just maintaining a slightly smaller calorie deficit. And I think for extended diets, for when you are trying to get very lean for like photo shoot or bodybuilding show, I think that could be so beneficial. So just that extra emphasis on giving plenty of time, and it's just been so smooth, and that's been nice. So yeah, I think a lot of people they map out their contest prep to be like the shortest on paper it can possibly be. And I think just adding like a couple of 4 to 6 weeks of buffer on top of that so that you can incorporate more diet breaks, refeeds, be in a smaller calorie deficit, then your training can still be productive. You can still feel generally normal day to day for as long as you can. So it's re-emphasized that kind of long timeline versus trying to like, again, do it as efficiently and in as short a timeline as possible.
And I think the research backs us up too in terms of muscle building. And again, not you're somebody that's obviously not in a good spot to build muscle in a deficit. I think from a lean, I think from a lean body mass perspective, I think the smaller that deficit can be, I think it probably is better for lean body mass retention and whatnot on the way down. So I'm wondering if that has something to potentially do with it for you, because it sounds like
Yeah.
you are going slower than you have in the past this time around.
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, it's just been, especially the more bodybuilders I surround myself by who like they are not even as lean as I am now, maybe 5 pounds more fat mass than I have now, but they are destroyed. And they're not destroyed because it's the leanness. It's because they didn't give themselves enough time. So they're having to do horrendous amounts of cardio, really low food. And I'm like, you shouldn't feel that way with
Yeah.
that much body fat on you. But the reason you do is because you're having to run an exorbitant calorie deficit. It's that sprint finish that you do not want to do. And I do think there's a fine line where if you're ready too early or if you diet too long, of course, you're going to exhaust the individual, whether or not that physiologically or psychologically, I don't know, but they're probably too intertwined. And this slow approach that I'm taking, I think is probably better for someone who's been there, done that, learned the hard way a bit. Not that I've ever had to do it that way and like I've not been in condition. That's not been a problem for me. But I think you're a bit more sold on it once you've done it a few times. I know I've got a few first timers, and when I give them the timeline that I map out, they're like, oh man, do I really have to diet that long? Can't we like do a show earlier or something? I'm like, dude, it won't be a good result if we do that. But they're fighting me for as little diet time as possible. I'm like, it's not the time that is really the issue. It's more the size of the deficit that you need to run.
And I think too, for anybody listening to this, people that maybe they aren't necessarily trying to get, they don't have as much muscle as you have, they're not as lean as you are now. I think maybe they could get away with a little bit quicker because they just have extra body fat. But somebody like you that, again, you have less body fat, more muscle. And again, you're going for this, you're going for a look. You're not necessarily going for like a certain weight. It's the look that you're going for. I could see how this approach is much better because of the context of everything that you have going on. So do you think that if you were coaching yourself, you would have gone at it a little, like you would have spent less time in a deficit? You think you would have extended your massing phase last time, or do you think this is where you would have ended up?
I actually mapped it out, so I could have told you, but I don't have it to hand because I'd already mapped out my entire season before just giving it to Cliff. But as soon as I handed the keys over to Cliff, I just surrendered myself completely to the process. And I think I'm pretty coachable. I think Cliff, I did a podcast with him. He's, yeah, you're coachable. I think I actually take direction really well. Like I know that from when it's been a long time, but when I had an office job, I like having a manager that directs me,
Yeah.
and I feel really good about that. Whereas if I'm left to my own devices, and not that I've been in trouble, but I someone telling me what to do, my girlfriend will confirm that. Like she's the boss, and I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem. Cool, tell me what to do. So yeah, I just surrendered myself to that. But maybe there would have been times I would have done things differently. I can actually remember was like, and I thought he was going to reduce my food. And I was like, cool, we're going to go for it. And he was like, Steve, we're going to take a diet break. And I was like, dude, not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to push harder. And then we checked in the week after. He was like, we're going to take another week. I know you're not going to want to do it. And I was like, it's all good. If you think that's what we should do, let's do it. So there have been times where my kind of athlete mindset of just wanting to push has been there and just be like, yeah, go, I feel good. But he's held me back. So yeah, I think again, he's been able to get me there and that's the reason I really wanted a coach was like I know I have the knowledge and I have people in my corner I can consult with, but can a coach take me further than I've been able to take myself? Can they do something different, even if it's just the stress reduction? That having someone to just take that is worth it to me. So I always come back to the sort of the best athletes in the world have coaches, right? So if I want to be my best bodybuilder possible, it probably makes sense to just give the reins to someone else.
It sounds like too, the stress that you've had go on outside has probably helped. Having a coach has probably helped mitigate some of that as well too, because then you can Get that, like you said, you just get that extra set of eyes with that, and you don't have to worry about, again, that would just be another stressor that you'd have to deal with. So I'm sure that probably was helpful with all the stuff you have going on outside of bodybuilding. And then as you're talking about all this, I think from the calorie standpoint, it sounds like you said you're eating more calories now than you have in the past when dieting. But it seems like, again, part of that is you're just going at a little bit of a slower rate of loss, which obviously is going to lead to a little bit higher caloric intake. Do you think it also stems from, because I know we last time we talked, I think you found that, I think from what I remember is you get to around like 195, 200 pounds, and that's where you just can't eat anymore at that point. But there's also that research that kind of came out about how probably not the greatest to like just continue to gain body weight. You get to this point to where you feel good and then you want a little bit of a slower surplus. Do you think staying a little bit leaner has also helped you during this process to where it's like you didn't have as much like body fat maybe that you needed to lose initially as well too?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ways that's helped, and this is something I'd be interested to talk to people who have to lose more to get to stage. But my leverages and my like physical body hasn't changed that much. Like I can still wear, and they don't fit quite the same, but I can still wear clothes that I wear when I'm my biggest. Like I don't have to change my entire wardrobe. Whereas I know competitors who have to lose 30, 40, some people lose 50 pounds, they have to like completely change their wardrobe. But of course, their leverages and their physical body is changing so much, whereas mine isn't that much. So I found, I think my like peak performance in the gym has been easier to hold because my physical body hasn't changed that much. So I think just being that bit leaner has allowed me to, yeah, hold those numbers better. And I think that in its own right is a really positive thing for maintaining muscle. I can't say, and I do think being a bit closer to stage again just allows you to lose at a slower pace, which is nice. So I do think there's some benefit to that. And I don't know if it's, I don't know the exact reason for it, but bodybuilders every time they compete, they tend to stay a little bit leaner in their off season. And I think for a lot of them, it just is because they get better at managing that kind of post show period, and then they understand that pushing their body weight up that high probably doesn't pay the dividends that they once did, and so they stay a bit tighter. And I don't think there's maybe even any necessary need for people to really mass up to those like unhealthy, very far away or very high body fat levels. Even as a newbie, I don't know if it's necessary as some people seem to think that it might be. It's hard to say because it obviously has resulted in gains for a lot of people, myself included. But I have no reason to believe that it was a necessary process to go through. But yeah, I don't know if that answered the question fully, but that's where my head's at.
Yeah, no, it's definitely helpful. And I think Eric Helms kind of talks about this where you probably at some point, and I think you've talked about this, at some point you probably want to push your body weight. Like you said, I think he calls it how many like trips to the well you have. And it's like you get one or two. And then after that, somebody like you that's done that already, you probably don't need to necessarily get to these super high body weights anymore at this point. And if anything, it's just probably going to hurt you when you actually do decide to compete. And I think a lot of people don't, realize that period of time is an extension of your prep if you look at it that way. Because like you said, if you gain too much body fat, then it's now you got to spend probably more time in a deficit. And again, the more body fat you have to lose, I would imagine, again, like you said, we have to go a little bit quicker. And there's just this trickle down effect to it. Again, I think figuring out what that sweet spot is for you in the off season probably is super, super helpful. And it seems like you've gotten to that point there. So what about, so as far as this prep goes, anything else that you've like specifically worked on or anything else that's been like super helpful during this prep that you've done differently or that you've just doubled down on?
Definitely double down on sleep. Just like really making sure in every sense to try and maintain it as best as I can, because I just know how much it hurts people and myself included. And there have been times, and I haven't been 100% perfect on this, where I've wanted more caffeine, but I don't. My standard is I have my Monster in the morning, 160 milligrams of caffeine, and that kind of sees me through the day. I don't have it. That's my first. I don't eat before that. I have that, and that allows me to extend my fast for another hour or so. So I delay my breakfast. And I have at times I've had two Monsters on a day, and I remember doing that and I regretted it. And then I also have tried like having a coffee or like a half calf coffee even. But I find when my caffeine gets over 200 milligrams, it predictably hurts my sleep. And so I just don't want to allow myself to get into that negative feedback loop of poor sleep, more caffeine. I would prefer to have a poor day of just feeling a bit tired and then better sleep and then not need to get on that caffeine train. So really making sure my sleep is good is vitally important. It's hard at the same time because the more aware you become of sleep and its importance, and the more you want it to be a certain way, the more anxiety there can be when
Yeah.
it gets bad. So it's a fine line. And yeah, I try and really put it into my life as like a lifestyle thing. So it's just something I do. It's just habits, habit driven. So I don't think about all these little details I have to do to get amazing sleep. It's just at this time I go get my blue light blockers, I put those on, and then at this, like, I'm going to be watching TV. When I start feeling sleepy between this time, and it always is, go up to bed. If it's hot, put the aircon on. So I bought a portable air conditioner because sometimes it gets real hot here in the UK even. So I've got one of those going because I was just like, anything that can help. And yeah, that's been great. So definitely doubling down on sleep. Anything else? I would say one of the biggest changes with Cliff, the two big things that he's doing a little bit differently to how I would. I don't think this plays into my calories being higher, is a higher protein intake. So I go a bit higher than some of the evidence-based folk, where it's like they'll go under a gram per pound of body weight or 2.2 per kilo. I'll stick around that or even slightly higher sometimes. But he's got me, I don't know what it is, but I'm on 235 grams on my low days, and my refeed days are at 210. So considerably above that recommendation. Obviously, the thermic effect of feeding is a thing, protein is higher, but the amount is tiny, right? At first it was really weird doing that much protein, but now like I really enjoy it. So I don't know, you just get into your ways of eating and behaviors. I would also say Cliff has got my fat slightly higher than I would typically have it. So my low days again it's 62, high days are at 72, and that's a roughly 20% of my calories, which is a very evidence-based general recommendation. But I would always like just go as low as like the minimum threshold of what we think is okay to sustain. So I'd be at like 40 grams at the moment and let my carbs go higher. So that's been a bit different. Like it's novel, like putting quite like I had 20 grams of peanut butter on my last meal. That's just like, why would I do that when I can eat this much more, I don't know, vegetable or fruit or what have you? But that's something else I've made a conscious decision to avoid this prep is like excessively stuffing myself. I don't know if there is anything to eating huge amounts of volume and stretching your stomach and then you not being as full based off that. So you have to consistently stretch your stomach and really stuff yourself. But none of my meals are like hugely voluminous. And I used to spend, I don't know if you've ever done this, Jeff, in a diet, cooking oats and just trying to volumize them as much as possible. So you'd cook them, recook them, add more water, blah, blah, blah. And you'd have a ratio of, I don't know, some crazy ratio of water to oats. Whereas I just put my water in, cook it. I like it nice and thick, like Bob's your uncle. I don't spend too much time. I'm trying to maintain as much normality as possible and not go into those extremes. Same with chewing gum. I don't know if I think I managed it last prep to barely have any chewing gum. Sometimes I get tempted. I'm just like, no, you end up having too much of it. It makes you feel crap. Avoid that. So I'm just avoiding some of those heavy diet hacks that I think ultimately just make you feel a bit crummy, even to the point where I will maintain my fiber within a range of 40 to 50 is where I feel my best. If I go above 50 grams, I just start feeling a bit bloated the next day. Digestion's not as good. It's just not worth it. Like, just don't have those raspberries and eat a bit of, I don't know, bread or something like this. Just being smart about those sort of things. And I think it comes back to that point of the off season is you're not getting as big and heavy. I think the more you compete as a bodybuilder, the more your whole lifestyle is just more the same. It's just you eat less
Yep.
and you're a bit leaner. So your habits and behaviors haven't got that wild. Your steps are probably very similar. You haven't had to do anything extreme. But yeah, a lot of what I'm doing is I'm just eating less. Otherwise, everything is pretty much the same. Yeah, there's some of the things that I've done and worked on. There's probably much more, especially in terms of relationships and stuff like that, that I need to work on. But yeah, those are the things that come to mind immediately. Oh, sorry, the last thing, Jeff, just one last thing, sorry,
Share it.
is Cliff does this different. And I've talked about this a lot. I still don't know how I feel about it. I'm fine with it, but he just takes Monday weigh-ins or a 1 week, like 1 weekday weigh-in. I guess if his Wednesday clients, they just give him his Wednesday weigh-in. So that's been different. I've still been weighing myself every day because I don't know, I like doing it. I'm not doing anything with that data apart from observing it. But yeah, he just takes that Monday weigh-in, which is different for sure. And I could see how some people could get into bad behaviors where they try and influence what that weigh-in is going to be, and so that their food doesn't go down or something. And I want to avoid that as much as possible.
A couple follow-ups on that. So the first is from the food volume thing. It's, hey, you're probably getting a good baseline of food volume, but like you said, you're not trying to overdo it, which you'll commonly see where people like try to like almost, it's like almost where they try to get, they think they can just hack hunger altogether and then they're not going to have any hunger at all. And we know that in a fat loss, when you're trying to drop body fat, that's unfortunately just the cost of doing business. And so again, it's good to get a good base of whole food and higher food volume stuff, but it's like that person that takes it to the extreme and keeps going from there. It's maybe you want to be careful with that. And like you said, you start running into maybe gut health issues, like digestion is off. I know when I chew gum, like I start getting like bloated, stomach doesn't feel great. And I think the same thing when overdo fiber or overdo food volume, you can start to run into those issues there. So not overdoing that. But as far as Cliff goes, a couple things, follow-ups there. He has your fats a little bit higher. So I'd be curious to hear the rationale on that, if he gave you any, and then same thing with the once a week weigh-ins.
I do have an answer for the once a week weigh-ins, and that is because he found in the past when he took averages, he wasn't as aggressive as he needed to be to get people stage ready. So he just found with the way that he works with people, it just works for him.
Interesting.
I have confidence enough in him as a coach where I'm just like, okay, that's cool. Because I like, you probably do the same daily weigh-ins or frequent weigh-ins and averages to smooth it out. And I find that works really well. And I like having that. But for him, that doesn't work as well. So totally cool. The higher fats, I never actually asked because they weren't much higher than where I've had them previously. So if I did, he might even say, hey, if that's your preference to go a bit higher carb, go for it. I haven't asked because he had my fats higher during when we started where I wasn't dieting in like January, February. And I enjoyed actually having higher fats. So I was just like, cool, let's run higher fat. So I've actually enjoyed, and I don't know if it's just, it'll be placebo, but I feel healthier knowing regularly eating whole eggs, regularly having salmon, regularly having nuts. Like these are things that I just, when you're going lower fat, you just can't because all your fats just come from things like oats or that bit of whey protein or some of the beef that you consume. So it's quite nice to have like purposeful fat intake. So that's been quite nice.
That's one thing I've changed because like I did realize it. And I think coming from when we get into kind of this physique kind of oriented, that tends to be, and that's what I see from people that come to me too, is high protein really ends up being pretty high carbohydrate and then like low fat, right? That seems to be the way. And again, if that works works well for you and you feel good, like obviously do that. But I do think that we end up missing out on fats. And like you said, all the fats you mentioned there, man, those are just that probably loaded with a ton of nutrients, right? Like you said, salmon, it's higher in fat. And so you could see how like people that are in like that really track macros, they end up missing out on some of those things, right? Same thing with whole eggs. Those also have a ton of nutrients in them too that are super beneficial to your overall health. Nuts, right? Like those would be things that we're missing out on if we have our fats too low. So I was just curious if he had anything there, but I think really it sounds like just probably adding in those foods, getting those nutrients in, maybe just helps out from that standpoint. Like you said, you probably take a little bit of a hit from like an overall food volume standpoint. Is that the worst thing in the world at the end of the day? So
yeah, I think because I'm still on 2,700 calories, so my carbs are at 300 grams on my low days. So people probably hear that and they'll be like, "Fuck you, Steve. That's my refeed day."
Yep, that definitely helps too. Being at 2,700 calories definitely helps because you have a little bit more wiggle room. Ask somebody who's on 1,800 calories, it probably gets it's a little bit tougher to fit all that in. Cool, yeah. And then I know you mentioned off air too, you're just running into a little bit of some diet fatigue. What does that kind of look like, and maybe what does the kind of process look like to manage that?
Yeah, so I've just noticed I'm less relaxed, like just got that underlying irritability where key signs for me is just if my dog Ada, she's down here at the moment, like she'll just do stuff she normally does, and normally it wouldn't irritate me at all, and then it's suddenly I'm like so annoying. I don't know, she's licking herself or something like that, or on a dog walk, she'll want to stop and sniff something, and I'm just like, nope, like I've got to just walk on. So I find myself, I have to catch myself when that happens, just take a breather, or and if funny, hearing my partner eat, I find more irritable now than it used to. It wouldn't have bothered me, whereas now I'm like, oh. So sometimes I have to just like take myself out of the room or try and zone out and forget about it. So that there's little things like that. And I think hunger wise, it's just something, my food, nothing's changed. I can just after I finish meals, I no longer feel very satisfied quite often. It's just okay. Previously, I would have been like feeling pretty satiated after that, whereas now not waking up in the morning hungry, whereas I wasn't before, and I could fast for longer periods and it not be a problem. And I think some of the associated things are like those periods of lower blood pressure, low blood sugar creepy in a little bit there. And I think, unfortunately, when working, sometimes I don't have the concentration that I should do. So I get distracted more easily. Or if I have nothing that I have to do, trying to do something that isn't, I don't know, a client check-in or emails or an Instagram post, if I have to try and do like more thoughtful work, it comes a little bit more challenging to me. Or things that, yeah, I don't know, future thinking in a sense, or planning for things ahead of time. It's just, oh, I just don't quite have the capacity for that. And so for me, with those sort of things, they come and go. So today's been a better day. I know I've had less hunger, I'm less irritable, my energy levels are better, and it's great. That's cool. Tomorrow's a refeed day, so it should be even better on that day. And so I think it's just knowing that it will pass and you just have to accept it. It's funny, I actually said it to my partner last night. So I could just generally feeling a bit more tired, beat up, diet fatigue's growing a little bit. And she was just like, and I was like, oh, hopefully it'll pass. And she was like, it might not, and that's okay. And I was like, you're right. It's also okay. It's just like you said, the cost of doing business. I know being here, I'm not meant to feel amazing, and I want to avoid feeling crappy as much as possible. But it's yeah, it's accepting that at times you might not be able to be at full capacity. This actually relates back to a point you asked about how do you deal with some of the stressful things outside of your life. Pre-planning helps. So with the podcast as an example, I am I'm normally a month ahead in terms of recordings. If I was when I used to do it, it used to just be a week ahead. So I'd record that week, it would just go out. Whereas now, yeah, like I said, a month ahead. So I'm just always not only thinking I need to be that month ahead, but then I want to book people in. And so like right now, I know I had two booked in for next week, but one person canceled on me. So that's one thing. So I've got one person next week. The week after, I've got two. I'm like, cool. That sets me up quite nicely. The other person will rebook. So it's just preparing for those. I've already made my notes. I'm prepared for it. That's the way I've always worked as well. With I don't know, at school, it wasn't like I'd hand my dissertation on the last day. It'd be like I hand it in a week ahead because I'm done already. Because that's the way. That's how I keep stress down. So I know as I get closer to these shows, I'm going to want to start prepping all of my things like, hey, am I booked in for my tan? Have I got my membership? Have I got my like commute sorted? Do I know where I'm staying? I want all of those things sorted ahead of time because then I can just put it on the back burner. So trying to help future Steve out by helping today's Steve out. I don't know. I actually can't remember what your question was, but
This is
hopefully
the
that
this
helped.
this is the prep brain coming in right here, isn't it? You can
Yeah, I
tell
hate
you.
that.
Yeah, no, I just asked you like asking about the diet fatigue, just how it's showing up and whatnot. But yeah, no, so you answered that. So as far as again leading up to it, do you think you guys will you be able to maybe sit at maintenance heading into it, or do you think that you'll or is this going to be a TBD type of situation? See how it goes.
Definitely see how it goes. It's funny. I had it might come out this week. Alberto Nunez on the podcast, and afterwards he was talking to me about, Cliff will probably do a rapid backload peak on you. I'll be very interested to see your experience with that. And I was like, will he? I have no idea. And Alberto was just, yeah, you'll be a prime candidate for it, I think. I was like, okay, exciting. So yeah, I know Cliff isn't much of a pre-planner or this sort of thing. So I haven't even asked about like stage weight or anything like that. I'm just like, hey, I'm going to let Cliff tell me what he wants from me, and I'm just going to execute. And so I'm almost just taking every day as it comes. Yeah, I still, I'm waiting to see those details on my physique where I'm like, that's new levels of condition. Once I start seeing those, Jeff, that's when my confidence is going to rise. At the moment, I'm just like, yeah, you're more muscular than last time. But when I start seeing, it's basically those lines in my glutes from the back. Once I start seeing true glimpses of more condition there, then I'll start getting very excited. But until that point, yeah, I'm just like, hey, put it on the back burner. Let's just move through. Not until maybe a month out, 5 weeks out, do I think it will be a bit more telling. At this point, I just need to keep doing the do, I think.
Yeah, Cliff seems like he's very similar to me in terms of with clients, like they like want to know the exact game plan. And it's part of it is, for example, I'm sure you get this all the time. How long should you be in a fat loss phase, or how long should you do fat loss, or how long should you be in a deficit, or how long should you be in a massing phase? And it really just depends on. Yes, obviously we want to have a blueprint to it, and again, if you have certain events, we obviously have to be ready for those. But it's like at the end of the day, you need to see what is going on before you can make these decisions. Same thing here. You could have this game plan of reversing into it, but again, maybe something comes up and that doesn't happen, right? So it's seeing how where you're at and then making that decision versus, hey, this is exactly how we're going to follow it. It seems like it's a little bit more reactive, which I think can be a great thing. I don't think that's necessarily a negative in that situation. I'm sure he has a general idea of where you're going, but it's like the exact details and nitty gritty aspect of it is going to be TBD on how things go.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's something that I always tell my clients, like I will map out how I generally want it to go, but I'm always like, hey, this is a blueprint that's subject to change. We can't guarantee this is how it's going to go. And sometimes when you do plan things ahead of time, I've had clients where they've already sold themselves on that's
Yep.
happening, and then they get in really in their head. So I've had it where, like in their spreadsheet, it said deload and like maintenance, and they're like, oh, like I had in my head to this week was going to be a maintenance week and a diet break, and I'm like, dude, we didn't lose enough weight. We're not lean enough to warrant it. So I'm like, shit, like I've really set this person up. So I'm always so careful to be like, hey, this is subject to change. Don't get carried away. Same in peak week. Like, as a competitor, you have to get comfortable with it changing and evolving. So I'm always careful to be like, hey, I know I have to. It's annoying for them, I think. It definitely is annoying. Like I have to wait, they have to wait to have my feedback to see their photos and guarantee that I'm happy. They just want to be like, no, more food, right? More food.
More
Like
food.
I'm flat, surely.
What about your training? We didn't really get to dive into that too much, but just curious, how's that going? What does that look like at the moment? Yeah.
Same split as I've been running my entire off season. I'm still running a 6 times per week, upper lower. Yeah, lots of still pretty high frequency. I have considered lowering it because my volume is definitely less than typical, and only my average volume. My kind of week one volumes are pretty static from my off season. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head where they're at, but it's near enough that 10 sets for lower body and then nearer 15 for upper body. We're back a little bit higher than that. But yeah, it's been going good. I've been maintaining, I haven't lost any performance that I'm aware of that I can think of off the top of my head. So I'm really glad that it's still holding well. In fact, I was building it for the initial phases, which you'd expect. So I just want to continue to hold on to those numbers. I know last prep, I managed to really hold on to a lot of my performance and didn't see any steep drop offs. But yeah, I'm also ready and open to the idea that if I want to get to that next level of condition, and this is always a question I had in my head, is did I need to just put the hammer down and really kill myself and crush myself to get to that condition? So I'll learn this time. Cliff will do that, I think, if he thinks necessary. And then maybe that's where some performance starts really dropping off. But at the moment, it's holding really well, and I'm enjoying it as well. And the biggest change actually will be, and I don't know where my head was with this before. And I think last prep, I maybe was a bit more set, happy, and doing a bit more volume. But my deload frequency was definitely higher last time. Whereas I've taken shorter deloads and they've been after more time. So my last deload was a few weeks ago now, but I basically did 7 weeks and then I took 2 days, the first 2 days into the next week as normal hard training. And then I took the rest of the week off. And now I've got back into things. So you could look at it as a shorter deload, or it's just you just trained like my volume was way down because I only did 2 days out of the week. And I've been enjoying that. I've been enjoying not going to the gym and doing half-ass workouts because they have to be during a deload, and just coming out of it and potentially doing other things, for example. So yeah, I don't think the training hasn't changed a whole bunch, but I'm happy just holding on. I think some people are really scared. This is probably a discussion for another time, but I don't know if you see this, Jeff, but people are really scared to just maintain performance. If you maintain performance that's a good performance
Hmm.
and it's at zero RAR, maybe, like you're not gonna, you might be able to add a rep after a while, but if you maintain that over 4 weeks, that's still just very good training.
Yeah.
And so I'm totally happy with that, so long as, yeah, I'm totally happy with it. There's no stress about that. Whereas in the past, I think I would have been like, oh, I should have been able to add or beat performance there.
Yeah, I agree because I think you also have to take into consideration fatigue's probably a little bit higher, and then also it's even higher with you being in a deficit too. So it's like you said, if you can maintain that performance, and I think especially somebody like you that's been training for a while, you're advanced at this point. It's like, can you reasonably expect to progress super consistently as well too? So yeah, no, I agree 100% with that.
Yeah, so I might get to week 4, 5 of my mesocycle, and I'm just like repeating performance for like week 6, week 7, and just going through the motions. Then I get to a point where, like you said, that fatigue accumulates, and I'm like dreading sessions, and I'm
Yeah,
like, holy shit! Like
yeah.
I'm maybe I see a few reps drop off here or there, or some niggles and injuries start creeping in. So yeah, I'm just happy doing that and happy siding, and I've had this throughout my off season as well, siding with on the side of training a bit too hard versus training a bit too easy, because I think the risks are higher when you train a bit too easy, especially as a natural. I just think we just need to have everything on our side, and yeah, that's something that I don't want not on my side.
Yeah, no, yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, just leaning a little bit more on making sure you push yourself versus like holding back in your training. Is there anything in the last 3 to 6-ish months from your like podcast or anything from a hypertrophy perspective that maybe you've tried to pick up on, or any interesting insights there, or anything like that that maybe you've tried to apply to your training or thinking about or anything like that?
Good question. It's funny enough. The first thing that comes to mind is just a reminder of there's freaks out there. As I interviewed Brian DaCosta, I knew how jacked he was. Like I've seen pictures. He's absurd.
Yep.
But talking to him and hearing how strong he is and hearing how much muscle he's holding on his frame, I'm just like, what? Only 10 years ago, me wouldn't have believed he was natural and that was achievable. But I absolutely, completely believe him. And yeah, it just blows my mind and it humbles me as a kind of bodybuilder, but also it also some weird way gives me so much gratitude for my journey and where I'm at and how I've been able to take myself to the point I'm at. So that's one immediate thing that comes to mind. I don't think there's been anything from those episodes from the past 6 months that I've learned something that's completely shifted my perspective or anything. I've
Let me ask.
enjoyed.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No, 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 go.
I was just going to say, for example, first of all, we know this hypertrophy stuff takes a long time. So I think that there's nothing wrong with enough, like nothing changing from that perspective. But I just didn't know any small thing. For example, there's that leg extension study about leaning back. Is that something maybe you've tried to incorporate? What about anything? Again, we've talked about length and work really a ton in the last couple of years, but there was that recent study around adding in some length and partials at the end of your set. Are those anything that you've maybe tried to incorporate or anything like that?
Yeah, I've already been on this lengthened train for quite a long time. So maybe I think it's 2 years, a solid 2 years. I've been doing some sort of length and partial work. My calves have been straight leg calf raises for years at this point before that research came out and basically confirmed what we know, where you're not getting much of a stretch on the chunk of the muscle. The gastroc grows just as well with a straight leg as a bent leg, whereas the soleus grows way more from having a straight leg. So I was already doing some things, and length and partials on calves is what I've been doing for, yeah, like I said, the last kind of couple of years. And all of my back work has been length and partials for basically a couple of years at this point. And I have been on that back work letting my so this is something I have a bit of a think about is I have a 2 RAR basically week 1 for back work quite often, 2 to 3 maybe, but 2 is what I'm gunning for. And that's till my length and partials. So maybe it's a pull down to eye line. To progress it, I'll obviously get to 0 RAR in a number of weeks, but to get I'll let myself get to a point where I'm like almost they're not minus RARs, you could call it beyond failure, but I'll let myself take it and gain even more partial partials, if that makes sense. So
Yep.
that's that beyond failure,
Yep.
which is applicable to movements that are hardest, short, and easiest long. And virtually all back movements are that way. So it's a way of continuing that progression model, like past failure in a sense.
Yeah.
There's not many things you can apply that to, especially if you already do them length and partials. So I haven't necessarily done too much there. With the leg extension, I was already doing it that way already. So I wasn't doing it as it just doesn't really work on my leg extension to lean
Yeah.
back properly because of the back. Um, but I've been doing probably more sissy squats than I ever have in my career because the stretch I can get on those is just gnarly and they're horrendous. But so yeah, nothing a lot of that stuff that's come out, I think it's just built more evidence upon what we already had. So I was already incorporating quite a lot of it. So I can't think that there's anything there that's really, yeah, changed anything.
And I think at the end of the day, that's probably a good thing because that just means that again, the kind of try the things that we always talk about, staying consistent and just hard, consistent training is really the big kind of thing there that's going to move the needle. And some of these things are nice to add in, but at the end of the day, staying consistent and pushing yourself consistently really is still going to be the best thing that you can do. And I think the fact that you just mentioned that you haven't incorporated a lot of new stuff into your training is a testament to that. I think that's a good thing to hear more than anything. You did mention there was one thing. I cut you off though. You said there was something that you said you were working on. Do you remember what that was? Because I would hate to not hear what you had to say there.
Damn, I completely actually
That's all right.
forgot what that was. But I've been
Sorry.
enjoying, I will say, with the podcast, I haven't taken it in a new direction, but I've just been enjoying kind of having some of these more laid back explorative discussions. It's like someone like Berge comes to mind, just talking about some of his experiences and lessons as a coach. And yeah, it's maybe I'm taking a better middle ground approach of evidence and personal experience. I think it's funny, as I do this longer, the more I respect wisdom and experience in the game versus just blanket studies. But yeah, it's just so funny to see. I think it's people are talking past one another quite often, though, with science. I know there's been this like anti-science backlash, but I think a lot of the time they're making a straw man out of the evidence-based space and the practitioners in the space. Immediately, yeah, some individuals come to mind where they talk about it as if people were presenting new evidence, as if, for example, that 52 set study where the leg training got up to 52 sets. And obviously, there's all these caveats of their training age and were they training other muscle groups, and they slowly ramped up to that. And maybe there's self swelling and water retention that obviously led into some of the readings on the results. But a lot of those things, when I think about the discussions I've had on the podcast, they're things people talk about. Often it's more so the onlooker who's they're just grabbing the headlines of these things, and then they're the ones perpetuating the poor information. So the people that are anti-science aren't anti-science and anti-science communicators. It's often they're anti how people are absorbing some of the information. It's just an interesting thing to see because yeah, quite often I just find people are talking past one another, and when you bring them together, or if you've listened to them long format, you understand that actually they align in their thoughts very closely, and yeah, it's all just a lot of hype and hot air.
Yep. Steve, appreciate your time, man. As always, really good to check in with you, see how things are going. It's actually more recent than I thought, but it still feels like it's been a little while. Still a ton of stuff that went on. And so, yeah, really appreciate your time. Is there anything coming out on your end here soon that you want to lead the audience to, let them know about? And then I think you mentioned that you're looking to go to Worlds, but are you doing a few shows leading up to that as well, too? I think
Yeah, I'll start with the shows beforehand. So I have the WNBF UK, which is going to be the qualifier. Depends. That's the one I'm definitely doing. The WNBF UK is the one I'm definitely doing as like the qualifier for Worlds. And that is, I've got it down here, the 6th of October. So that'll be my
about
first show. Yeah. So basically 8 weeks out. And then we've got the UK FBA the weekend after. They're two of the biggest federations, along with the BNBF shows, just didn't line up with my calendar this year. Decided not to do any with them. I've already asked Cliff what he thinks, and he said we'll make a call nearer to the time, considering the WNBF Netherlands. I have a client there as well, which is the 21st of September. There's also the 22nd of September is the WNBF Ireland. So I think it's actually quicker for me to get to the Netherlands than Ireland, which is surprising. But I think I can literally get like the Eurostar or something to the Netherlands, and so it's nice and easy. So I might do one of those. It's just another opportunity to, one, get the cobwebs off because it's been a while since I've competed, but also in some ways to get that pro card, you have to put yourself out there more. And just going for the WNBF UK and being stubborn to just trying to win it there, it's going to be tough to win it there. And I don't want to say that I'm picking easier shows to try and win it because I don't want to say that. But in some sense, it is that. But it's also, I think that's fine as long as it's a competitive show and the judges feel that you're pro worthy. So anyway, we'll see. I'll be incredibly surprised if I get a pro card this year. I think a lot of people have in their head that I'm going to get it, and I'll be like, man, if I get that, that'd be like crazy to me. Anyway, I'm rambling here. So they're the shows ahead of time. And then the only thing I want to flag up to the audience is something that I've been working on with the guys from JPS and Brandon Kempter is we've a physique contest prep course 2.0. So they have
Cool.
their first comp prep course. I don't know if I think I actually no, I did contribute like one lecture to that on peak week, but they're completely revamping it, completely redoing it. I've got I think 4 or 5 lectures that I've already drafted. I need to record them, and yeah, that's going to be coming out soon. So if people want to check that out, yeah, they can see that it's going to be very comprehensive, and obviously those guys know what they're doing. I think Eric Helms is also contributing to that, so that's quite cool.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, no, that's great. And then you also have your YouTube. I feel like you're super consistent there. Obviously the podcast, super consistent in those places as well. And then always there on social media. Cool, Steve. Yeah, man, really appreciate your time. I guess next time we'll chat with you. You'll have wrapped up the contest prep. You'll hopefully have your pro card at that point. But yeah, really looking forward to checking in with you then. And we'll probably chat on Instagram, but obviously face to face probably won't be till after. So good luck with everything, man. Again, ton of hard work that you've put in, and you can definitely tell in your physique. So really looking forward to seeing what you bring this year. So again, appreciate your time, Steve, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you very much, Jeff.